We are 48 schools across 14 cities, but together we are one Shawnee mission, and this is our time to shine.
Hi, I want to welcome everyone to episode 9 of Shawnee Mission Mic'd Up. I'm Dr. Michelle Hubbard, and I am the host for Shawnee Mission Mic'd Up, and we're all glad you're here with us today.
And I'm Dr. Jeremy Higgins, the co-host for Shawnee Mission Mic'd Up. Echo the sentiments of having everyone listening in today on whatever format you're using. Also, hope all that our listeners out there today enjoyed a good Thanksgiving break. Obviously, had a nice little break for Thanksgiving. Hopefully, you guys all enjoyed that as well. So
absolutely. I would like to just real quickly recap our previous podcast, which was around American Education Week, and it was just fun to be able to celebrate our staff in the Shawnee Mission School District and all the things they do for kids every single day. So that's really awesome. So just a final shout out to a great week of celebration of our staff members.
Huge shout out to all our staff, all the hard work that they put in on a day in, day out basis to help support all the kids in the Shawnee Mission School District. We couldn't do any of this work without them. And so just again, huge shout out to all of our staff members.
So this podcast has taken a little different twist than any of our others. But if you'll recall, one of our main reasons for doing podcasts were to share the great things happening in the Shawnee Mission School District. And those are really our great fun ones to do. But this one is a little more serious in regards to this issue that we have going on both in the Shawnee Mission School District, the state of Kansas, and nationally as well. And this has all really come about since the pandemic. And it's around this idea of chronic absenteeism. So people often say, well, what does that mean? What does chronic absenteeism? So it's actually defined, and I'm going to read the definition because I want it to be really clear on what we're talking about. But a student is determined to be chronically absent when they miss at least 10% of their enrolled school days. This would be like missing an average of one school day every 2 weeks. So for an example, before we left for Thanksgiving break, there were 64 school days that we had been in attendance. So students who had missed at least 6.5 days between August, the first day of school, and the break would have been considered chronically absent. So, and I want to make sure that we understand that school activities and field trips are not included in that number. So by the end of the school year, approximately 180 days, students who miss at least 18 days would be considered chronically absent.
Now, one point of clarification on that for our listeners, I think would be important. So a lot of times, not a lot of times, we have two different types of absences really here in Shawnee Mission. We have excused absences, we have unexcused absences. I believe that the chronic absenteeism data it doesn't matter if you're excused or unexcused. Both of those types of absences roll in there, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so when parents, maybe they have a doctor's appointment for their child or a dentist appointment and their child has to miss some of the school day, that's an excused absence. But that still does count towards that absence for this chronic absenteeism data point.
Absolutely. And I also want to clarify, sometimes we talk about absenteeism as daily average attendance. So what is our daily average attendance? And if you look, Shawnee Mission historically has had really, really great daily average attendance of most students. But this is really digging in specifically to those particular students that are chronically absent.
Right, missing a lot of days.
Right.
Yeah. Now we've here in Shawnee Mission have historically, and at least over the past years that you and I can remember, have tracked this data around chronic absenteeism. But as you mentioned, the pandemic, we've seen an uptick in these data points since the pandemic, and that's really brought more attention and more of a focus onto the chronic absenteeism data point, correct?
That is absolutely correct. So if we think about the school year 2018, 17-18, 18-19, when we start really looking at that data, and we look at how we tracked grade level wise, there is a significant difference between pre-pandemic attendance and attendance currently.
Yeah.
In some cases, we've more than doubled at some grade levels.
Wow.
And so, and also, this is a trend that we're seeing in the state of Kansas, but actually Shawnee Mission's chronic absenteeism is higher than the state of Kansas, just a little bit, but it is higher, and it's worth noting.
Currently, or the
That
end
was
of last year.
That was at the end of
Yeah,
last year.
yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
And we also, so obviously as a district, we recognize that we've got some hot spots, I guess you could say, some places where we need to do some work, and we recognize that work and the problem, and are committed to doing that. I think being a secondary guy, when I saw some of the numbers at our 11th and 12th grade numbers, I was like, oh my goodness gracious, that is a high percentage.
It's significant. Just for example, we ended last school year with our seniors that a little over 46% of our seniors were chronically absent.
Wow.
But in addition to those high school kids, I mean, we all think about seniors having senioritis, but I'm really worried about our kindergartners too. So 20% of our kindergartners last school year were chronically absent.
Yeah.
So
That one definitely jumped off the table too.
absolutely. So I think we have a guest. Do you want to talk about our guest that's going to join us?
Yeah, so really excited to have an expert, I guess, in this field coming on to join us. Cecilia Leong is here. She is Vice President of Programs for Attendance Works, which is a national organization. Cecilia, thanks for being here with us today. I guess to kick off, would you just take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about kind of what you do?
Yes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join you today. I'm the Vice President of Programs for Attendance Works, which is a national nonprofit dedicated to improving attendance policy and practice so that kids can succeed in life as they attend school regularly.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for being here. First thing I wanted to I guess, touch on, what are some of the root causes that Attendance Works has identified around this issue of chronic absenteeism? Has Attendance Work been able to identify some of those root causes and key areas?
Great question. So yes, we've long tracked all the different reasons why students don't attend school. I know the stereotype is that students are skipping school and willfully not coming, but there actually are 4 big categories of reasons why students don't attend. First are barriers, things like transportation or lack of access to healthcare. Second is aversion. You're avoiding school because there's something negative happening, like bullying. Third is disengagement, and we've seen a ton of that during the pandemic and after. And finally, misconceptions, not understanding the impact of missing school. I love that you open with framing and saying that, gosh, if it's an excused absence, it's fine, right? I have a note. But what chronic absence shows you is that it's the lost opportunity to learn. So it doesn't matter whether you had a note or not, your child missed out that day.
So, are you seeing patterns in the data? Are there particular areas or are groups of students that are impacted more frequently by chronic absenteeism?
Absolutely. So pre-pandemic, we saw that particular groups of students, certain racial ethnic groups, African American students, Native American students, Pacific Islanders had higher rates of chronic absenteeism. And it certainly has continued in the prior school year. We also see that students with disabilities and students who are living in poverty also have very high rates.
How about kindergartners? Are you seeing that nationally? That one really surprised me, and I did notice. Since we set this up, I started following you on Twitter, and I noticed just recently, within the last week, you tweeted about how important it was for kindergartners to be in school. That when you miss a day of learning in kindergarten, it's like missing a lot of time just because of the rapid pace of learning. So, what's the thinking with kindergartners?
Well, 2 things. First, there's no national data. We don't collect national data by grade, so we don't have it for kindergartners. I can tell you here in my home state, it's a crisis level. 40% of the kindergartners in California are chronically absent. And the reason it matters is kindergarten, for those of you who are early childhood educators, you know, this is foundational. It's not kindergarten of old where you think it's just play or optional. A lot happens in kindergarten that leads to the foundation for future learning, including reading proficiently. So when kids miss that much at the very beginning, it puts them at risk.
Cecilia, I know you haven't dug into our data and just have it totally figured out and everything, but from what you've heard us talk about and from what you've seen, does our data kind of I guess mirror what's out there nationally, just in terms of pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and what maybe other districts around the nation, around the country are seeing with chronic absenteeism?
Yeah, in some ways, you are very much like the rest of the nation, that you've seen a big surge in absenteeism, much higher than it was before, double in some cases. I see the same patterns in terms of your grade level distribution with high chronic absence in the early grades, like kindergarten, and also high at the other end. So it's kind of a U-shaped curve. Um, in some ways, you're better off than the rest of the nation. The national chronic absence rate is almost 30%, and you all are, slightly lower than that at 22, 23%. So you're not as badly off as the rest of the nation, but it's totally not normal for your district.
Talk to us about the correlation between chronic absenteeism and student achievement.
So there's been a growing body of research showing how absences affect student learning and outcomes. So beginning in kindergarten, when students are chronically absent, just missing that 2 days a month over the course of a year leads to students not reading proficiently by third grade. It leads to poorer performance academically by middle school. And if it continues, it leads to dropout or lower graduation rates. So the evidence has been mounting. It's been done nationally, research nationally, as well as in particular states.
I didn't dig into this deeply, but I just asked Dr. Grumman, our assessment director, to just take a quick look about our students in the last school year that were chronically absent and how they performed on the Kansas State assessment. And 31% of our students that are chronically absent scored in level 1 on the state assessment. So definitely a correlation. And over 50% of them scored in level 1 and 2 combined.
Yeah, so definitely seeing something lower there. Cecilia, so we mentioned kind of that U-shaped curve. We talked a little bit about kindergarten. Specific for those 11th and 12th graders where we see those high rates of chronic absenteeism, any specific strategies for combating the dreaded senior, and I know it's not all senioritis, right? But what have you guys, are there strategies for really looking at that issue with our older kids, with those juniors and seniors in high school?
Absolutely, absolutely. We recently completed a study of high school bright spots in the state of Connecticut. And what we saw that made a difference for schools that had better attendance, better results, were several things. I'll just list two or three of them. First, it's taking an approach that shifts mindsets, that doesn't look at students and punish them or blame them, but looks for ways to support and encourage them to come to school. Second, given that you have high levels, it's a team approach. So you can't rely on one person to solve the entire chronic absence crisis. But really, the heart of the matter is giving students a reason to be there. Some of it is about relationships. As a secondary educator, I'm sure you know, students come because somebody cares about them. It's a caring adult in the building, or it's a set of peers who care and they look forward to seeing them. That's what we heard early in the pandemic. I feel so isolated. I miss my friends. And then finally, I think for secondary students in particular, learning has to be meaningful and relevant to and connected to their futures. So you really see that programs that emphasize rigor and relevance, really draw kids. They have a reason to be there. It's linked to their futures. And many of our young people, particularly those who are in economically challenged situations, are really making that hard trade-off of work to bring in money for the short term versus study. And so if you can combine those two things, for example, like a paid internship or a mentoring program where they are the peer mentor being paid, it takes that false choice away, and it gives students the opportunity to both provide income as well as keep learning and working towards a better future. So that's just a quick overview of some of the things we've seen.
I appreciate that.
And I think that aligns so nicely with our real world learning work that we're doing at the secondary level. And this year we set 2 district goals, and one of them really is specifically digging into the well-being of a kid and making sure that we're taking care of them from all aspects. And absenteeism is one of those aspects in that goal. And so we are monitoring chronic absenteeism on a monthly basis for the first time ever. And we're doing that at the district level, but then we also have building goals for each of our, for all of our schools, elementary, middle, and high, to really dig into those absenteeisms and start asking questions and build those relationships. So everything that you said, we're really hitting on, which I feel really good about right now. But I guess I would just ask, are there any other strategies that we really haven't discussed yet that you think have been successful? And especially, I think we talked a lot about our secondary schools, but more maybe at that elementary level?
So in addition to relationships, right, someone noticing that you're there every day and greeting you positively and noticing when you weren't there and welcoming you back, I do think there's a lot that can happen with families and the parents who are responsible for bringing students to school. There's been a lot of confusion about when a child should or should not come to school. So we learned in the pandemic, even if you sniffle or a little cough, don't come near me. We don't want your germs. Well, we're kind of post-pandemic in a way now, and we are returning to normal guidance about health. But there still is a lot of confusion. We are, as parents, trying so hard to be responsible. So if I see my child is ill and I'm not really clear about what I should do in that situation, I keep my child home. And so I think that's one of those areas where better information, clearer guidance from your district, from your school leaders, can help families make the right choices for their students.
I think that's great advice and a place that we can probably focus a little bit of energy on. So thank you for bringing that forward for us.
Yeah. Cecilia, thanks so much again for being with us today. It's great to have an outside voice to chime in and provide us with some strategies and some insights as well. So really, we do appreciate your time being with us today. So
absolutely.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to Cecilia Long for joining us today around a very important topic of chronic absenteeism. I know it's a concern for us here in Shawnee Mission, and working really hard to get kids back in school and those relationships and make sure they want to be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll continue to work on that. Just a reminder that we do drop episodes of Shawnee Mission Mic'd Up every 2 weeks. We do have a link on our website to drop ideas if you have ideas you would like for us to consider to talk about.
As we wrap up this episode, our quote for the episode comes from Marilyn Monroe. Everyone is a star and deserves a chance to shine. So thanks again to Logan DeAngelis for his work on the music, to our entire communications team for all their hard work, and obviously to all of our listeners. We appreciate you listening in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And until next time, shine on, Shawnee Mission.